Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The sun had already set over Maplewood, Tennessee, when the doors of the small police station burst open. Deputy Clara Hutchins looked up from her desk, coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. What she saw made her heart stop. Two little girls stood in the doorway, twins no older than 6. One of them was pushing a rusty wheelbarrow, her tiny arms trembling with effort. Inside the wheelbarrow lay her sister, curled up and whimpering, her face pale as milk. The girl pushing the wheelbarrow was covered in dirt, her blonde hair tangled with leaves. But it was her eyes that struck Clara most. They were wide, desperate, and far too old for such a young face. "Please," the girl cried out, her voice breaking. "Please help us. Daddy put something inside her." Clara dropped her coffee and rushed forward. The other officers in the station scrambled to their feet. "Sweetheart, what happened?" Clara knelt beside the wheelbarrow, her hands hovering over the sick child. The little girl's belly was swollen, and she moaned softly with each breath. "Rosie won't stop crying," the standing twin said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Daddy said he was fixing her, but she got worse. She got so much worse." Clara's mind raced. She looked at the swollen belly, the pale skin, the shallow breathing. She did not know what had happened, but she knew one thing for certain. This child needed a hospital. Now. "Call an ambulance," she shouted over her shoulder. "Tell them it's an emergency. A child 6 years old, severe abdominal distress." She turned back to the twins. The healthier one was shaking badly, still gripping the handles of the wheelbarrow as if letting go would mean losing her sister forever. "What's your name, honey?" Clara asked gently. "Lily," the girl whispered, "and that's Rosie. She's my twin." "Lily, you are so brave. You did the right thing bringing her here. Can you tell me where you live?" Lily pointed toward the dark road beyond the station windows. "The farm, past the old bridge. Daddy told us never to leave. He said the outside world is dangerous." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "Then why did you leave tonight?" Lily's lip trembled. She looked down at her sister, then back at Clara. "Because Rosie was screaming too much, and Daddy just kept praying. He wouldn't stop praying. So I waited until he fell asleep, and I took her." The ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Clara placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "You saved her life tonight, Lily. Do you understand that?" But Lily did not answer. She just stared at Rosie, holding her sister's small hand as the paramedics rushed through the door. As they lifted Rosie onto the stretcher, Clara knelt beside Lily one more time. "Lily, I need to ask you something important. Where is your daddy now?" The little girl looked toward the window, toward the darkness of the rural road that stretched into the unknown. "Home," she whispered. "He doesn't know we're gone yet." Clara stood slowly, her jaw tight. She did not know what they would find at that farm. She did not know what kind of man would keep 2 little girls hidden from the world. But she intended to find out. The ambulance raced through the empty roads of Maplewood, sirens cutting through the silence of the night. Inside, paramedics worked urgently over little Rosie. Her twin sister Lily sat frozen in the corner, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit she had grabbed from the wheelbarrow. Her eyes never left Rosie's face. At the hospital, Dr. Nina Calloway was already waiting at the emergency entrance. She had been on duty for 16 hours, but the moment she saw the stretcher, exhaustion vanished. 6-year-old female, severe abdominal distension, the paramedic reported. "Sister," says the father put something inside her. Dr. Calloway's expression hardened. She had heard those words before in her career. They usually meant the worst. "Get her into exam room 1, now, and keep the sister close but separate. I need to examine this child immediately." The next hour was tense. Nurses moved quickly. Machines beeped. Lily was taken to a quiet room where a kind social worker named Deb Kowalski brought her warm milk and a blanket. "Lily, can you tell me about your home?" Deb asked softly. Lily stared at the cup in her hands. It's far away, past the bridge. Daddy doesn't. Visitors. When was the last time you saw a doctor? Lily shook her head. Daddy says doctors are bad people. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He says they took Mommy away. Deb felt her chest tighten. She wrote quickly in her notebook. Meanwhile, Dr. Calloway completed her examination. When she finally stepped out of the room, Deputy Clara Hutchins was waiting, arms crossed, face tense. What did you find? Clara asked. Dr. Calloway removed her gloves slowly. It's not what we feared. There's no sign of physical harm in that way. But what I did find is deeply troubling. She led Clara to a screen showing the X-ray results. The child has severe constipation and dangerous inflammation in her abdomen. She's been malnourished for months, possibly longer. And here, she pointed at strange shadows on the image. I found fragments of dried herbs, some kind of vite and root material, and what appears to be ite paste. Clara frowned. Ite? Ite, mixed with herbs. Someone has been giving this child homemade remedies, folk medicine. Whoever did this believed they were healing her. Dr. Calloway paused. But they were slowly making her worse. Much worse. If that little girl hadn't brought her sister here tonight, Rosie might not have survived another week. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, processing the information. Relief and horror fought for space in her mind. No abuse, but neglect so severe it nearly cost a child her life. The father, Clara said. We need to bring him in. There's something else, Dr. Calloway added. Lily mentioned their mother. She said the father blames doctors for losing her. Clara nodded slowly. I'll head to the farm now. Can you keep both girls here and safe? Of course. Before Clara left, she stopped by the room where Lily sat with Deb. The little girl looked up, still holding her stuffed rabbit. Is Rosie going to be okay? Lily asked. Clara knelt down to meet her eyes. The doctors are taking very good care of her. You were so brave tonight, Lily. Your sister is lucky to have you. Lily's lower lip trembled. Daddy didn't mean to hurt her. He wanted to fix her, like he tried to fix Mommy. Clara placed a gentle hand on Lily's arm. I know, sweetheart, but sometimes people need help even when they don't want it. She stood and walked toward the exit, her boots echoing in the quiet hallway. The night was far from over, and somewhere out there, past the old bridge, a broken man was waiting. The drive to the Whitmore farm felt endless. Clara's patrol car crawled along the dark rural road, headlights cutting through thick fog. The old bridge creaked beneath her tires as she crossed. Beyond it, the world seemed to grow quieter, lonelier, as if civilization had simply given up. She found the property at the end of a dirt path, hidden behind overgrown trees. The farmhouse was small and weathered, paint peeling from its wooden walls. A single light glowed in the window. Clara stepped out of her car, hand resting on her holster. The air smelled of damp earth and something else, herbs, sharp and medicinal. She approached the porch slowly. The wooden steps groaned under her weight, and there he was. Henry Whitmore sat in a rocking chair, motionless, staring at nothing. He was a thin man, maybe late, 30s, with hollow cheeks and eyes that seemed to look right through the world. His hands rested on his knees, still and pale. He did not react when Clara stepped onto the porch. Mr. Whitmore, she said carefully, I'm Deputy Clara Hutchins. I'm here about your daughters. For a long moment, Henry said nothing. Then slowly he turned his head toward her. They're gone, he whispered. I woke up and they were gone. They're safe, Mr. Whitmore. They're at the hospital. Rosie is being treated. Something flickered in Henry's eyes. Pain. Deep, ancient pain. I was trying to save her, he said, his voice cracking. The doctors couldn't save my Grace. They took her from me. They promised they would help, and then she was gone. Clara kept her voice calm. Mr. Whitmore, I need you to come with me. Your daughter is very sick. She needs real medical care. Henry shook his head slowly. was doing what my grandmother taught me, what her grandmother taught her, natural remedies, pure things from the earth. I thought—" He stopped, his breath shuddering. "I thought I could fix her, the way I couldn't fix Grace." Clara felt a strange mix of emotions. This was not a monster, this was a broken man, drowning in grief, clinging to desperate hope. But his desperation had nearly killed his child. "Mr. Whitmore, I need you to stand up and come with me. We can talk more at the station." Henry did not resist. He rose slowly, like a man twice his age, and walked toward her car without a word. He did not ask about handcuffs. He did not ask for a lawyer. He only asked one question as Clara opened the back door of the patrol car. "Will you tell them I'm sorry? Will you tell my girls I was only trying to protect them?" Clara did not answer. She drove in silence back toward town, the eyed fog swallowing the farm behind them. At the station, Henry was processed quietly. He sat in the holding room, head bowed, hands folded, like a man waiting for a judgment he had already accepted. Clara was filling out paperwork when the front door opened again. An elderly woman stood in the entrance, breathless, trembling. Her silver hair was pulled back and her eyes were red from crying. She wore a simple coat and clutched her purse with both hands. "Please," the woman said, her voice shaking. "Please, I need to know. Are they alive? Are my granddaughters alive?" Clara stood slowly. "Ma'am, who are you?" The woman straightened, fighting to compose herself. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I'm their grandmother, and I've been trying to get them back for 3 years." Eleanor Whitmore stood in the police station, her hands trembling as she gripped her purse. She looked fragile, but there was something fierce in her eyes, something unbroken. Clara guided her to a chair and brought her a cup of water. "Mrs. Whitmore, your granddaughters are safe," Clara said gently. "Rosie is at the hospital receiving treatment. Lily is with her. They're going to be okay." Eleanor closed her eyes and tears spilled down her wrinkled cheeks. "Thank God," she whispered. "Thank God." She sat in silence for a moment, composing herself. Then she looked up at Clara with a steady gaze. "I need to tell you something, Deputy. I need you to understand how we got here." Clara sat across from her. "I'm listening." Eleanor took a deep breath. "I raised those girls from the day they were born. My daughter Grace was sick, very sick. She had a chronic illness that made it hard for her to care for the twins on her own. So I moved in with them. I fed them, bathed them, sang them to sleep every night." Her voice softened. "Grace tried her best. She loved those girls more than anything, but her body was failing. And Henry couldn't accept it." "What do you mean?" Clara asked. "He believed doctors were the enemy. When Grace got worse, he refused to take her to the hospital for the longest time. He thought he could cure her with herbs and prayers." Eleanor shook her head. "By the time he finally agreed to let her go, it was too late. Grace passed away 3 years ago." Clara nodded slowly, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "After Grace died, Henry changed," Eleanor continued. "He blamed the doctors, he blamed me. He said I was the one who convinced Grace to go to the hospital, and that's why she died." Her hands tightened around the cup. "He took the girls and moved to that farm. He cut off all contact. And when I tried to fight for custody, the court sided with him. He was their father. I was just the grandmother." She paused, reaching into her purse. She pulled out an old photograph worn at the edges. It showed a young woman holding 2 newborn babies, smiling despite the exhaustion in her eyes. "This is Grace," Eleanor said softly. "The day the twins were born. I remember holding her hand and promising I would always protect her children." She stared at the photo, lost in memory. "I remember when Grace herself was a baby, so small, so full of life. I made the same promise to her then, that I would always keep her safe." A tear fell onto the photograph. "I failed her, Deputy. I couldn't save my daughter, and for 3 years I couldn't save my granddaughters either." Clara reached out and placed a hand on Eleanor's arm. You didn't fail, Mrs. Whitmore. You never stopped fighting. Eleanor looked up, her jaw set with quiet determination. I want them back, Deputy. I don't care what it takes. I don't care how long the courts make me wait. Those are my daughter's children. Her voice broke, but she pushed through. And I will not abandon them again. Clara studied the woman before her. 72 years old, weathered by grief, battered by a system that had ignored her. But not broken, never broken. I'll do everything I can to help you, Clara said. But I need to warn you, the system is slow and it's not always kind. Eleanor nodded slowly. I know. I've learned that the hard way. She placed the photograph back in her purse and stood steadying herself on the chair. Can I see them? She asked. Can I see my granddaughters tonight? Clara hesitated, then nodded. I'll take you to the hospital myself. The hospital hallway was quiet when Eleanor arrived. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale glow on the white walls. Clara walked beside her, guiding her toward the room where Lily waited. Eleanor's heart pounded with every step. 3 years. 3 years since she had held her granddaughters. 3 years of unanswered letters, rejected phone calls, and closed doors. When they reached the room, Eleanor paused at the doorway. Inside, Lily sat on a small chair, wrapped in a blanket, clutching her stuffed rabbit. A social worker sat nearby, speaking softly. Lily looked up. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then recognition sparked in the little girl's eyes. Grandma? Eleanor's composure shattered. She rushed forward and knelt beside Lily, pulling her into a tight embrace. My sweet girl, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. My sweet, brave girl. Lily buried her face in Eleanor's shoulder. I remember you, she said quietly. You used to sing to us. The song about the birds. Eleanor laughed through her tears. Yes, baby, the song about the birds. She held Lily for a long time, afraid that if she let go, she might wake up and find it was all a dream. Later that night, Eleanor was allowed to see Rosie, who was sleeping peacefully after treatment. She stood by the bed watching her granddaughter breathe and made a silent promise. I will never let you go again. The next few weeks were the hardest of Eleanor's life. She learned quickly that the system was not designed for women like her. There were forms to fill out, documents to gather, hearings to attend. Everything required proof, patience, and money she did not have. At the courthouse, she waited in long lines only to be told she had the wrong paperwork. At the social services office, she was transferred from one person to another, each one apologizing, but offering no real help. One afternoon, Eleanor sat at the public library, trying to fill out a custody application on the computer. The form required her to upload documents in a specific format. She did not understand how. A young clerk walked by, glanced at her screen, and sighed impatiently. Ma'am, you need to convert the file to PDF. It's basic. Eleanor's cheeks burned with shame. I don't know how to do that. The clerk walked away without helping. Eleanor sat alone, staring at the screen, her eyes blurring with frustrated tears. That night, she returned to her small apartment. She sat on the edge of her bed, exhausted and defeated. The weight of everything pressed down on her chest. Maybe they're right, she whispered to herself. Maybe I am too old. Maybe I can't do this. She looked at the photograph of Grace on her nightstand. Then her eyes drifted to something else. A small drawing Lily had made during their visit at the hospital. 2 stick figures holding hands with wobbly letters underneath. Me and Grandma. Eleanor picked up the drawing and held it close. She thought of Grace as a baby, tiny and fragile in her arms. She thought of the promise she had made all those years ago. No, she said aloud, her voice stronger now. Not yet, I'm not done yet. The next morning, Eleanor returned to the library. She sat at the same computer, struggling with the same form. But this time, an older woman sitting nearby noticed her frustration. She had kind eyes and silver hair pinned back neatly. Having trouble, dear? The woman asked. Eleanor hesitated, embarrassed. I can't figure out how to upload these documents. The woman smiled gently and pulled her chair closer. Let me help you. I've been through this before. The system makes it hard on purpose, I think. Together, they worked through the form. By the end of the hour, Eleanor had submitted her application. Thank you, Eleanor said, her voice thick with gratitude. I don't even know your name. The woman extended her hand. Ruth. Ruth Bellamy. And something tells me you and I are going to be good friends. While Eleanor fought her battle with paperwork and courts, Deputy Clara Hutchins was fighting a different kind of battle. She needed to understand how two little girls had suffered for so long without anyone noticing. Clara started by visiting the neighbors closest to the Whitmore farm. The first was old Mr. Patterson, who owned the property across the road. Sure, I saw the girls sometimes, he admitted, leaning against his fence, playing in the yard. Thought it was strange they never went to school. But Henry kept to himself. Didn't seem like my business. Clara's jaw tightened. A child's safety is everyone's business, Mr. Patterson. He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Next, Clara visited the general store in town. The owner, a man named Dale, remembered Henry. He came in every few weeks, Dale said. Only bought flour, salt, and dried herbs. Lots of herbs. I thought maybe he was one of those natural living types. He shrugged. Never thought much of it. Clara felt her frustration growing, sign after sign, and no one had acted. Her final visit was to Martha Jennings, an elderly widow who lived just a mile from the Whitmore farm. Martha invited Clara inside and served tea with shaking hands. I knew Grace, Martha said quietly. Sweet girl. When she was pregnant with the twins, I used to bring her apple cake every Sunday. We'd sit on her porch and talk for hours. Her voice trembled. After Grace passed, I saw Henry pulling away. The girls stopped coming outside. I told myself he was grieving. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I found this near their property months ago. I should have brought it to someone sooner. Clara unfolded the paper. It was a child's drawing, two small girls with tears on their faces. Beneath them in uneven letters were two words. Help us. Clara stared at the drawing, her heart heavy. Martha wiped her eyes. I failed them, Deputy. We all did. Henry Whitmore sat alone in a small room at the county psychiatric facility. His hands rested on the table, still and pale. His eyes stared at nothing. Dr. Vivian Cross sat across from him, a notebook open in her lap. She had been evaluating him for 2 weeks now, trying to understand the man behind the tragedy. Henry, she said gently, can you tell me about your childhood? Henry was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to speak. My grandmother raised me, he said. She didn't trust doctors. She said they only wanted money. She taught me that the earth provides everything we need. Herbs, roots, prayer. He paused, his voice dropping. When I met Grace, I thought I had found my angel. She was so full of light. When she got sick, I believed I could heal her, the way my grandmother healed me when I was young. Dr. Cross leaned forward. But Grace needed more than herbs, Henry. His face crumpled. I know that now. But back then I was so afraid. Afraid the doctors would take her away. Afraid I would lose her. Tears slid down his hollow cheeks. And I did lose her. I took her to the hospital too late and she slipped away. Right there in that cold white room. He looked up at Dr. Cross, his eyes haunted. After that, I couldn't let the same thing happen to my girls. I kept them close. I kept them safe from the world that took their mother, Dr. Cross wrote quietly in her notebook. She had seen cases like this before. Grief that twisted into fear, love that turned into control. Henry, you understand that what you did hurt Rosie? That your remedies made her very sick? Henry nodded slowly, his shoulders shaking. I thought I was saving her. I thought I was being a good father. His voice broke. But I failed them. Just like I failed Grace. Dr. Cross closed her notebook. Later that day, she met with Clara at the station. "He's not evil," Dr. Cross explained. "He's deeply unwell. His mind built walls to protect himself from grief, but those walls trapped his children inside." Clara nodded grimly. "So what happens now?" Dr. Cross hesitated. "I'm concerned. He keeps saying he needs to finish protecting them. I don't know what that means, but I don't think he's finished." Lily and Rosie had been placed in a foster home on the edge of Maplewood. It was a small house with a yellow door and a garden full of wildflowers. The woman who cared for them was named Patty Green, a soft-spoken widow with gentle hands and a warm smile. For the first few days, the twins barely spoke. They stayed close together, holding hands wherever they went. Rosie was still weak from her treatment, and Lily watched over her like a tiny guardian. But slowly, carefully, the girls began to open up. Patty would find them in the garden, chasing butterflies. She heard Lily giggle for the first time when a ladybug landed on her finger. She watched Rosie start to color again, filling pages with bright flowers and sunny skies. One evening, Patty sat with the girls on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Rosie looked up at her with wide eyes. "Miss Patty, is Daddy a bad person?" Patty felt her heart ache. She chose her words carefully. "I think your daddy is very sad, sweetheart. Sometimes when people are sad for a long time, they make mistakes." Lily, sitting beside her sister, spoke quietly. "Daddy is sick, like Mommy was. But different." Patty marveled at the child's wisdom, so young yet carrying so much understanding on her small shoulders. "You girls are very brave," Patty said, "and very strong." Rosie leaned against Patty's arm. "I miss Grandma. When can we see her again?" "Soon, honey. Very soon." Eleanor visited twice a week, always bringing small gifts. A coloring book, hair ribbons, cookies she had baked herself. Each visit ended with long hugs and promises. But during one visit, Eleanor noticed something troubling. Rosie seemed thinner. Her eyes were tired. After the girls went to play, Eleanor pulled Patty aside. "Is Rosie eating?" Patty's face fell. "She tries, but she gets scared. She says she's afraid the food will hurt her again." Eleanor closed her eyes, pain washing over her. The damage Henry had done ran deeper than anyone had realized. "We'll get through this," Eleanor whispered, more to herself than to Patty. Together. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived. Eleanor woke before dawn, unable to sleep. She stood in front of her small closet, staring at the few dresses she owned. Her hands settled on a dark blue dress with small white buttons, the same dress she had worn to Grace's funeral. "For strength," she whispered, pulling it on. Ruth picked her up at 8 o'clock. The older woman squeezed Eleanor's hand as they drove toward the courthouse. "You've prepared everything," Ruth said. "You've done everything right. Just breathe." Eleanor nodded, but her stomach was tied in knots. The courthouse was an old brick building with tall columns and heavy wooden doors. Inside, the hallways echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations. Eleanor felt small beneath the high ceilings, like a child lost in a world built for giants. She found the courtroom and took her seat at the front. Deb Kowalski, the social worker, sat nearby and offered an encouraging nod. Then the judge entered, an older man with gray hair and a stern face. He shuffled papers without looking up. The hearing began. Eleanor listened as lawyers spoke in complicated language about custody, rights, parental fitness, and evaluation periods. Her head spun with legal terms she barely understood. Then it was her turn to speak. She stood slowly, her knees unsteady. She had prepared a statement, written and rewritten a dozen times. But as she looked at the judge, the words felt inadequate. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling, "I am 72 years old. I don't have much money. I don't have a big house. But I have love. I have been loving those girls since the day they were born." She paused, steadying herself. "I raised them for 3 years while my daughter was sick. I fed them, bathed them, sang them to sleep. And when my daughter passed away, I lost them too. Not because I was unfit, but because the court decided a father's rights were more important than a grandmother's love. Her voice grew stronger. I am not here to speak against Henry. He is a broken man who needs help. But those girls need me. They need stability. They need someone who will never give up on them. She reached into her folder to present a document, but as she looked down, her heart sank. It was the wrong version, the old form, without the updated signature. Her hands began to shake. She heard whispers behind her. Someone murmured, "Poor thing. She doesn't even understand the paperwork." Eleanor's face burned with shame. She looked at the judge, her mouth open, but no words came. The judge glanced at the document, then at Eleanor. His expression was unreadable. "Mrs. Whitmore, I appreciate your statement. However, this court requires complete and proper documentation." He set the paper aside. "I am ordering a 60-day evaluation period before making a final decision on custody." 60 days. 2 more months of waiting. 2 more months of uncertainty. Eleanor sat down, heavily, her vision blurring with tears. After the hearing, Deb Kowalski found her in the hallway. "Don't give up," Deb said softly. "The system is slow, but it's not impossible. You still have a chance." Eleanor nodded, but she felt hollow inside. She had fought so hard, and still the finish line seemed impossibly far. That night, alone in her apartment, Eleanor sat by the window and stared at the darkness outside. For the first time in months, doubt crept into her heart. "Maybe I can't do this," she whispered. "Maybe I'm just a foolish old woman." The phone rang, shattering the silence. Eleanor answered with a weary voice. "Hello?" It was Patty Green, and she was panicking. "Mrs. Whitmore, something happened. Henry was released on bail this afternoon, and he came to the foster home. He was asking to see the girls." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "Are they safe?" she demanded. "Yes, the police came and turned him away. But Eleanor," Patty's voice broke, "he didn't look right. He kept saying he needed to protect them, that the world was too dangerous." Eleanor gripped the phone, her fear mixing with fierce determination. "I'm coming," she said. "Don't let anyone near those girls. Till I get there." Eleanor arrived at the foster home within the hour. The night was cold and her breath formed small clouds as she hurried up the front path. Patty met her at the door, her face pale with worry. "The police are patrolling the area," she said quickly. "They warned Henry to stay away. But Eleanor, you should have seen his eyes. He looked lost, desperate." Eleanor stepped inside and went straight to the girls' room. Lily and Rosie were asleep, curled together in a small bed, their hands intertwined. They looked peaceful, unaware of the danger that had come so close. Eleanor stood in the doorway, watching them breathe. She made a silent vow. "No one will take you from me again." She stayed the night, sleeping in a chair beside their bed. Every sound made her jump. Every creak of the old house set her heart racing. By morning, exhaustion had settled deep into her bones. But as sunlight streamed through the window and Lily stirred awake, Eleanor found the strength to smile. "Good morning, sweetheart." Lily rubbed her eyes and looked up at her grandmother. "Grandma, did you sleep here?" "I did. I wanted to be close to you." Lily smiled, a small but genuine smile that warmed Eleanor's weary heart. In the days that followed, Eleanor realized something important. She could not do this alone. For years, she had carried the weight of her fight in silence. She had been too proud to ask for help, too ashamed to admit she was struggling. But pride would not save her. Granddaughters. Ruth Bellamy had already proven herself a true friend. She had helped Eleanor with paperwork, driven her to appointments, and listened without judgment. Now, Ruth introduced Eleanor to something more. "There's a group of us," Ruth explained one afternoon over tea. "Women like you and me. We meet at the church every Thursday. We call ourselves the Circle." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "What kind of group?" Ruth smiled. "Just women. Retired teachers, nurses, farmers' wives. Women who have lived long lives and learned a thing or two. We support each other, and right now, Eleanor, you need support. That Thursday, Eleanor walked into the church basement with hesitant steps. A dozen women sat in a circle of folding chairs, chatting and laughing. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Ruth stood and waved her over. Everyone, this is Eleanor. She's one of us now. One by one, the women introduced themselves. There was Dolores Cunningham, a retired nurse of 75 who still carried bandages in her purse, out of habit. Her voice was soft but steady, and her eyes sparkled with quiet strength. There was Margaret Chen, a former school principal who had raised 4 children and buried 2 husbands. She spoke with the calm authority of someone who had seen everything life could throw at her. There was Betty Morrison, a farmer's widow who had run her family's land alone for 20 years after her husband passed. Her hands were rough, but her heart was tender. And there were others, women of different backgrounds but similar spirits. Women who had survived loss, hardship, and loneliness. Women who refused to be invisible. Eleanor sat among them, unsure of what to say. Ruth placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Tell them your story, Eleanor. We're listening." So Eleanor spoke. She told them about Grace, about the twins, about Henry and the farm, about 3 years of fighting a system that seemed designed to crush her, about the hearing, the humiliation, the fear. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Dolores leaned forward. "How much do you need for the legal fees?" Eleanor blinked. I don't know exactly. The lawyer said maybe a few hundred more for filing costs." Margaret nodded. "We can raise that by next week. Betty, can you organize a bake sale?" Betty grinned. "Already planning it in my head." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to do this. You barely know me." Ruth squeezed her hand. "We know enough. We know you're a mother fighting for her family. That's all we need to know." Dolores spoke again. "I can drive you to your visits with the girls. I have a car and nothing but time." Margaret added, "And I'll write a letter to the judge. A character reference. I've written dozens over the years. Judges listen to retired principals." The women laughed, and for the first time in weeks, Eleanor laughed too. Over the following days, the circle became Eleanor's lifeline. Dolores drove her to the A. foster home twice a week. Margaret wrote not 1 but 3 letters on her behalf. Betty organized a bake sale at the church that raised enough money to cover Eleanor's remaining legal costs. But more than the practical help, it was the emotional support that sustained Eleanor. When she felt like giving up, Ruth would call with words of encouragement. When the nights felt too long and lonely, Dolores would stop by with homemade soup and company. When the system seemed impossibly cold and cruel, the women reminded her that she was not alone. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Eleanor sat with Ruth on her small porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. "I don't know how to thank you," Eleanor said quietly. "All of you. I was drowning, and you pulled me out." Ruth smiled, her weathered face soft in the fading light. "That's what women do, Eleanor. We've been pulling each other out of deep water for generations. Our mothers did it, their mothers did it. It's how we survive." She reached over and took Eleanor's hand. "You've been fighting alone for too long, but not anymore. You have us now." Her grip tightened with quiet strength. "And we don't give up easy." Eleanor looked at her friend, at this woman who had once been a stranger and was now a sister. She felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. Real, solid, unshakable hope. "Thank you," she whispered. Ruth nodded. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when those girls are home with you for good." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "I will." Henry Whitmore had stopped attending his psychiatric appointments. Dr. Vivian Cross reported his absence to the authorities, her voice tight with concern. "He missed 3 sessions in a row. He's not answering his phone. I'm worried about what he might do." Deputy Clara Hutchins drove out to the Whitmore farm the next morning. The property looked even more neglected than before. Weeds had overtaken the garden. The windows were dark and lifeless. Clara knocked on the door. No answer. She walked around the house, peering. Through windows, the kitchen was empty. Dishes were piled in the sink. On the wall, something caught her eye. Words, scrawled in black marker, uneven and desperate. "They will never take them from me." Clara's stomach turned. She radioed for backup and entered the house. It was empty. Henry was gone. She searched every room, looking for clues. In the bedroom, she found notebooks filled with rambling writings, pages and pages of fear and paranoia. Henry wrote about doctors who wanted to steal children, about a world that was too dangerous, about protecting his daughters at any cost. One page made Clara's blood run cold. "I have to finish what I started. I have to keep them safe forever." Clara immediately called Patty Green at the foster home. "Keep the girls inside, lock the doors, don't let anyone in except the police." Then she called Eleanor. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to—" "Stay calm. Henry has disappeared. We don't know where he is, but we're taking every precaution." Eleanor's voice was steady, but Clara could hear the fear beneath it. "What do you need me to do?" "Stay close to your phone. If you see or hear anything unusual, call me immediately." That night, Maplewood felt different, quieter, darker. Neighbors who had once ignored the Whitmore situation now locked their doors and watched the streets with wary eyes. Clara organized patrols around the foster home and the surrounding area. Officers drove slowly through the rural roads, flashlights scanning the fields. But Henry was nowhere to be found. Eleanor could not sleep. She sat by her window, watching the empty street below. Every passing car made her heart jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. Ruth had offered to stay with her, but Eleanor had refused. "I need to be alone with my thoughts. Tonight." Now she regretted that decision. She picked up the phone and dialed Patty's number. It rang 4 times before Patty answered, her voice groggy with sleep. "Hello? Patty, it's Eleanor. Are the girls okay?" "They're fine, Eleanor, sleeping peacefully. The police drove by 20 minutes. Go. Everything is secure." Eleanor exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry for calling so late. I just needed to hear that they were safe." "I understand. Try to get some rest. We're all watching over them." Eleanor hung up and leaned back in her chair. She closed her eyes and tried to calm her racing heart. But peace would not come. Somewhere out there, Henry was moving through the darkness, and Eleanor knew deep in her bones that he was not finished. 2 days passed with no sign of Henry. Clara expanded the search, reaching out to neighboring counties. She interviewed anyone who might have seen him. Gas station attendants, truck drivers, farmers working late in their fields. Nothing. It was as if Henry had vanished into thin air. On the 3rd night, Clara sat at her desk, exhausted and frustrated. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. The case files spread before her offered no answers. Her phone. Deputy Hutchins. It was Patty Green, and she was crying. "Clara, the girls, and they're gone." Clara shot to her feet. "What do you mean, gone?" "I checked on them at midnight. They were asleep, but when I went in at 6 this morning..." Patty's voice broke into sobs. "The window was open. They're not here. Someone took them." Clara grabbed her keys and ran. The news spread through Maplewood like wildfire. By sunrise, the entire town knew. 2 little girls had been taken in the night. Their father, a man already broken by grief, had vanished with them into the darkness. Clara set up a command center at the police station. Officers from 3 counties arrived to help. Volunteers gathered in the parking lot, waiting for instructions. The local news van parked outside, cameras rolling. But Eleanor could not sit and wait. She arrived at the station before 7, her face pale but determined. Ruth and Dolores were with her, refusing to let her face this alone. "I need to help search," Eleanor told Clara. "I can't just sit here." Clara hesitated. "Mrs. Whitmore, you should let us handle this. You need to rest." "Rest?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "My granddaughters are out there with a man who has lost his mind. I will not rest until they are safe. Clara looked at the elderly woman before her, 72 years old, exhausted, terrified, and yet standing tall, ready to walk through fire for those children. All right, Clara said, but you stay with Ruth and Dolores. You stay safe. The search began. Teams spread out across the countryside, combing through fields, forests, and abandoned properties. Dogs were brought in, trained to track scent. Helicopters circled overhead, scanning the terrain with thermal cameras. Eleanor walked with Ruth and Dolores along the back roads near the Whitmore farm. The morning was cold and their breath hung in the air like small ghosts. Where would he go? Ruth asked. He must have somewhere in mind. Eleanor shook her head. Henry doesn't think like a normal person anymore. He's not planning, he's running. Running from a world he believes is trying to destroy him. They searched for hours, through overgrown paths, past crumbling fences, into the edges of the forest where sunlight barely reached. Nothing. By afternoon, Eleanor's legs were shaking. Dolores insisted they rest, but Eleanor refused. Just a little longer, she said. Please. They pressed on. As the sun began to set, hope started to fade. The search teams regrouped at the station, reporting empty fields and dead ends. Clara stood before a map covered in red marks, each one representing an area already searched. We've covered almost everything within a 20-mile radius, she said. If he went further, we'll need more resources. Eleanor sat in the corner, staring at the floor. Her body was exhausted, but her mind would not stop racing. Where could he have taken them? Where would a broken man hide two little girls? She closed her eyes and thought. About Henry, about the man he used to be, about the stories Grace had told her. And then suddenly a memory surfaced. The Miller barn, she whispered. Clara turned. What did you say? Eleanor looked up, her eyes wide. The old Miller barn. It's about 5 miles east of Henry's farm, Grace told me. Once that Henry used to go there when he was young. It was his hiding place, his sanctuary. Clara grabbed her radio. All units, redirect to the old Miller property. Abandoned barn 5 miles east of the Whitmore farm. Move now. The convoy raced through the darkening roads. Eleanor sat in the back of Clara's patrol car, her hands clasped together in prayer. Ruth held one hand. Dolores held the other. Please, Eleanor whispered. Please let them be there. Please let them be alive. The Miller barn appeared on the horizon, a skeletal structure of rotting wood and rusted metal, standing, alone in an empty field. It had been abandoned for 20 years. No one had any reason to go there, except a man trying to hide from the world. Clara stopped the car at the edge of the property. Other vehicles pulled up behind her. Officers moved into position, flashlights cutting through the eye. Twilight, and then from inside the barn, a faint glow, the flicker of candlelight. Clara raised her hand, signaling everyone to hold. She turned to Eleanor. Stay here. No matter what happens, stay in the car. Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. Clara moved forward, her heart pounding. The barn door was slightly open. She could hear something inside. A child crying. The moment of truth had arrived. Inside that barn, 2 little girls and their broken father waited in the darkness. Clara pushed the barn door open slowly, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The smell hit her first. Damp. Hay mildew, and the faint trace of smoke from a dying candle. The floor was covered in old straw and debris. Wooden beams groaned overhead, threatening to collapse at any moment. She moved forward carefully, her boots silent against the dirt floor. Behind her, 2 officers followed at a distance. Weapons drawn but pointed down. Clara had given strict orders. No sudden movements, no loud voices. They did not know Henry's state of mind. A soft whimper echoed from the far corner of the barn. Clara's heart clenched. She raised her flashlight and saw them. Henry sat on the ground, his back against the wall. His clothes were torn and dirty. His face was gaunt, unshaven, hollow. In his arms he held both girls tightly, as if he could shield them from the entire world. Lily was awake, her wide eyes filled with terror. She had her arms wrapped around Rosie, who lay limp against her. Father's chest. Rosie's breathing was shallow, her face pale as moonlight. Clara stopped several feet away and slowly lowered herself to one knee. She kept her voice calm and gentle. "Henry, it's Deputy Hutchins. I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to talk." Henry did not respond at first. His eyes stared past her, unfocused, lost in some distant place. His lips moved silently, as if reciting a prayer only he could hear. "Henry," Clara said again, "look at me, please." Slowly, his eyes shifted to her face. There was no anger in them, no malice, only exhaustion and sorrow so deep it seemed. Bottomless. "I had to protect them," he whispered. "The world is too dangerous. It takes everything. It took Grace." Clara nodded slowly. "I know, Henry. I know you love them. I can see that." She glanced at Rosie, whose small body seemed to grow weaker by the minute. The inflammation had likely returned. Without medical attention, she could slip away right here in this crumbling barn. "Rosie needs help," Clara said gently. "She's very sick, Henry. If we don't get her to a doctor, we might lose her. And I know you don't want that." Henry looked down at his daughter. His hand trembled as he brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. Something shifted in his face, a crack in the wall he had built around himself. "I was trying to save her," he said, his voice breaking, "the way I tried to save Grace. But I keep failing. I keep failing everyone I love." Clara took a slow breath. "You haven't failed yet, Henry. You can still help her. You can still do the right thing. Let me take Rosie to the hospital. Let me help your daughters." The silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. Lily spoke then, her small voice cutting through the tension like a beam of light. "Daddy, please. Rosie is really sick. She needs the doctor." Henry looked at his daughter, at her tear-streaked face, at the trust that somehow still lived in her eyes, despite everything. And something inside him broke, not in the way that destroys, in the way that finally releases. Tears spilled down his hollow cheeks. He pulled Rosie closer for one final moment, pressing his lips to her forehead. "I'm sorry, baby," he whispered. "I tried to keep you safe. I tried to be a good father. But I failed you, just like I failed your mother." He looked at Lily, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." Then, slowly, he loosened his grip. Clara moved forward gently and lifted Rosie into her arms. The child was burning with fever. Her pulse was weak but steady. "Get the paramedics in here now," Clara called over her shoulder. "We need to move fast." Officers rushed in, wrapping Lily in a blanket and guiding her outside. Paramedics arrived with a stretcher, carefully placing Rosie on it and racing toward the waiting ambulance. Henry remained on the ground, motionless. An officer approached with handcuffs, but Clara raised her hand. "Give him a moment." She knelt beside Henry, who sat slumped against the wall, his face buried in his hands. "I never wanted to hurt them," he said, his voice muffled. "I just wanted to keep them safe. That's all I ever wanted." Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know, Henry. But now it's time to let others help. It's time to let go." Henry nodded, slowly, offering his wrists without resistance. As Clara led him out of the barn, the night air hit her face, cold and sharp. Red and blue lights flashed in the darkness. Voices shouted orders. Engines roared to life. And standing at the edge of the field, clutching Ruth's arm for support, was Eleanor. Her eyes found Rosie on the stretcher, being loaded into the ambulance. Then they found Lily, wrapped in a blanket, being comforted by Dolores. Eleanor's knees nearly buckled, but she stayed standing. She had to stay standing. Rosie was alive. But the fight was not over. The longest night was just beginning. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the vehicle raced into the darkness, sirens screaming. Eleanor stood frozen at the edge of the field, watching the red lights disappear down the road. Ruth held her arm tightly, keeping her steady. "She's alive," Ruth whispered. "They found Her in time. Hold on to that. Eleanor nodded, but her body was trembling. She turned and saw Lily standing nearby, wrapped in a gray blanket, her small face pale and exhausted. Dolores had an arm around her shoulders. Eleanor walked over and knelt down, ignoring the pain in her knees. She opened her arms, and Lily fell into them without a word. "You're safe now," Eleanor whispered, holding her granddaughter tight. "You're safe. Grandma is here." Lily's small body shook with silent sobs. She clung to Eleanor as if afraid she might disappear. "Rosie was so sick," Lily said, her voice muffled. Against Eleanor's shoulder. "Daddy kept saying she would get better, but she just got worse and worse." Eleanor stroked her hair gently. "I know, sweetheart. But the doctors are going to help her now. Rosie is strong, just like you." Clara approached, her face weary but relieved. "Mrs. Whitmore, we're going to transport Lily to the hospital so she can be checked out. You can ride with her if you want." Eleanor looked up. "And Rosie?" "She's already on her way. Dr. Calloway is meeting the ambulance. She's in good hands." Eleanor rose slowly, still holding Lily's hand. "Then let's go. I need to be with both of my girls tonight." The hospital waiting room felt colder than Eleanor remembered. She sat in a hard plastic chair, Lily asleep against her side. Ruth and Dolores sat nearby, keeping vigil. Clara had gone to file her report, but promised to return. The clock on the wall ticked. Slowly. Each minute felt like an hour. Other people drifted in and out of the waiting room. A young mother with a crying baby, an elderly man with a worried face. But Eleanor barely noticed them. Her entire world had narrowed to one thing, the door to the surgical wing. Rosie had been taken into emergency surgery immediately upon arrival. Dr. Calloway had spoken briefly to Eleanor before disappearing behind the swinging doors. "The inflammation has spread," she had said, her voice calm but serious. "We need to operate now to prevent further damage. I'll come find you as soon as we're finished." That had been 3 hours ago. Around midnight more people arrived. First came Patty Green, her eyes red from crying. She rushed to Eleanor and knelt beside her chair. "I'm so sorry," Patty said, her voice breaking. "I should have protected them better. I should have—" Eleanor took her hand and squeezed it. "This is not your fault, Patty. You did everything you could. Henry was determined. No one could have stopped him." Patty nodded, tears streaming down her face. She sat in a nearby chair, wrapping her arms around herself. Then came Martha Jennings, the neighbor who had looked away for so long. She entered the waiting room hesitantly, clutching a small bouquet of flowers. "I know I have no right to be here," Martha said quietly, "but I had to come. I had to know if the girls were okay." Eleanor looked at the woman who had once baked cakes for Grace, who had watched the family fall apart and done nothing. Part of her wanted to feel anger, but tonight she had no room for bitterness. "Sit down, Martha," Eleanor said. "We're all waiting together." Martha sat, her head bowed, tears falling silently onto the flowers in her lap. More people arrived as the night wore on. Members of the circle, women Eleanor had only known for weeks but who felt like lifelong friends. Betty Morrison brought coffee and sandwiches that no one could eat. Margaret Chen brought blankets and kind words. By 2 in the morning, the small waiting room was filled with people. Some sat in chairs. Others stood against the walls. A few knelt in quiet prayer. Eleanor looked around at the faces surrounding her, old and young, neighbors and strangers, all united by 2 little girls they had come to care about. "This is what community looks like," she thought. "This is what it means to not be alone." At 3:30 in the morning, the surgical doors finally opened. Dr. Calloway stepped out, still wearing her surgical cap. Her face was tired, but there was a small smile on her lips. Eleanor stood immediately, her heart pounding. "She made it," Dr. Calloway said. The room erupted in gasps and quiet sobs of relief. Ruth grabbed Eleanor's hand. Dolores covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Dr. Calloway continued, The surgery was successful. We were able to remove the blockage and repair the damage. Rosie is stable now. Eleanor's knees nearly gave out. Ruth steadied her. However, Dr. Calloway added gently, I need to be honest with you, Mrs. Whitmore. The prolonged neglect caused some permanent effects on her digestive system. She'll need ongoing medical care and a special diet for the foreseeable future. But with proper treatment and love, she can live a full and happy life. Eleanor nodded, tears streaming down her face. Can I see her? She's sleeping now and will be for several hours. But yes, you can sit with her. Eleanor turned to Lily, who had woken up during the commotion. The little girl looked up at her grandmother with hopeful eyes. Is Rosie going to be okay, Grandma? Eleanor knelt down and took Lily's face in her hands. Yes, sweetheart. Your sister is going to be okay. The doctors fixed her. She just needs to rest now. Lily's face crumpled with relief, and she threw her arms around Eleanor's neck. I was so scared, she whispered. I thought I was going to lose her. Eleanor held her tight. You saved her life, Lily, twice now. First when you brought her to the police station, and again when you helped your daddy let her go. You are the bravest girl I have ever known. Eleanor spent the rest of the night sitting beside Rosie's hospital bed, holding her granddaughter's small hand. The room was quiet except for the soft beep of monitors. Moonlight filtered through the window, casting a gentle glow over the sleeping child. Ruth and Dolores had taken Lily to get some rest in a nearby room. The others had gone home, promising to return in the morning, but Eleanor could not leave. She watched Rosie breathe in and out, steady and strong. Your mommy would be so proud of you, Eleanor whispered, stroking Rosie's hair. Both of you. She's watching over you right now. I know she is. She leaned back in the chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. But even as her eyes grew heavy, a thought kept her heart warm. Tomorrow is the final hearing. Tomorrow everything would be decided. But tonight, in this small hospital room, her granddaughters were alive. They were safe. And that was enough. For the first time in years, Eleanor closed her eyes and slept without fear. The longest night was over, but the final battle still waited. Everything Eleanor had fought for would come down to one moment. The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed the documents before him. Eleanor sat at the front, her hands folded in her lap. She wore the same dark blue dress from the first hearing, but today Ruth had pinned a small flower brooch to her collar. For good luck, Ruth had said that morning, and for grace. Behind Eleanor, the benches were filled with familiar faces. Ruth and Dolores sat in the front row. Betty, Margaret, and the other women from the circle were there. Patty Green had come, along with Clara Hutchins in her uniform. Even Martha Jennings sat quietly in the back, clutching her handkerchief. Lily sat beside Eleanor, dressed in a new dress that Dolores had bought for her. She held her grandmother's hand tightly, her eyes fixed on the judge. The judge cleared his throat and began to speak. This court has reviewed all evidence and testimony regarding the custody of Lily and Rosie Whitmore. He paused, looking at the papers. The father, Henry Whitmore, has been admitted to a psychiatric facility for long-term treatment. Medical professionals have determined that he suffers from severe mental illness that went untreated for years. Eleanor listened quietly. Despite everything, she felt no hatred toward Henry. Only sadness for a man who had loved too hard and broken too completely. The judge continued, Mr. Whitmore will not face criminal prosecution. Instead, he will receive the care he needs. This court believes that treatment, not punishment, is the appropriate path. He set the papers down and looked directly at Eleanor. Mrs. Whitmore, I have read the letters submitted on your behalf. I have reviewed the reports from social services. I have spoken with the children themselves. Eleanor's heart pounded. Lily squeezed her hand tighter. I have also observed something remarkable, the judge said, his voice softening. I have seen a community come together to support a family in crisis. I have seen neighbors who once looked away now standing up to help. and I have seen a grandmother who never stopped fighting for her grandchildren, despite every obstacle this system placed in her path." He paused, and for a moment, Eleanor thought she saw a hint of emotion in his stern face. "Mrs. Whitmore, given the circumstances and the overwhelming evidence of your dedication and love, I am granting you full and permanent custody of Lily and Rosie Whitmore." The courtroom erupted in quiet gasps and tearful smiles. Ruth grabbed Dolores's hand. Betty wiped her eyes. Clara nodded with a small, satisfied smile. Lily looked up at Eleanor, her eyes wide. "Grandma? Does that mean—" Eleanor pulled her granddaughter into a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, sweetheart. It means you're coming home with me. Forever." 3 weeks later, Eleanor opened the door to a small apartment on the edge of Maplewood. The women from the circle had worked miracles. Fresh paint on the walls, new curtains in the windows, 2 small beds in the bedroom, each covered with a colorful quilt that Betty had sewn by hand. Rosie walked in slowly, still, recovering but growing stronger every day. Her eyes widened as she looked around. "Is this our new home, Grandma?" Eleanor smiled. "Yes, baby. This is our home." Lily ran to the bedroom and gasped with delight. "Rosie, come look. We have our own beds." The girls explored every corner while Eleanor stood in the kitchen, overwhelmed with gratitude. Ruth appeared beside her, carrying a casserole dish. "First meal in your new home," Ruth said. "Dolores is bringing dessert, and Margaret insisted on dropping off groceries later." Eleanor shook her head in wonder. "I don't know how I'll ever repay all of you." Ruth set the dish on the counter and turned to face her friend. "You repay us by living, Eleanor, by raising those girls with love, by being happy." That evening, as the sun began to set, Eleanor sat on the small porch with her granddaughters. Lily was drawing in a notebook. Rosie rested her head on Eleanor's lap, tired but content. The sky turned gold and pink, painting the world in gentle colors. "Grandma," Lily said, looking up from her drawing, "are we going to be okay?" Eleanor looked at the 2 precious faces before her. She thought about Grace, about the promise she had made so many years ago, about all the pain and struggle that had led to this moment. She stroked Rosie's hair gently and smiled. "Your mommy would be so proud of you both," she whispered. "So very proud." Lily leaned against her grandmother's shoulder. Rosie closed her eyes peacefully. Eleanor looked at the horizon where the last light of day was fading into evening. She thought about the road behind her, long and hard, and she thought about the road ahead, uncertain but filled with hope. She was 72 years old. Her body was tired. Her resources were limited. But her heart was full. And for the first time in many years, Eleanor Whitmore was home. The end.